Chapter 9. My children, it so happened that whilst the heir to the Egyptian throne was being initiated into the mysteries of Ra-Atanu at Heliopolis, one arose from amongst the priesthood of Ammon at Thebes. He was the son of the king's sister, and was looked upon by her and by the brother priests of Ammon as the future heir to the throne, which they proposed to seize for him upon the death of his uncle Amenhotep III. He was their one hope of escape from what seemed to them inevitable, namely, that the worship of Ra-Atanu would supplant them throughout the length and breadth of Egypt. This royal priest's name was Osiris, he being a priest of the idolatrous cult of Osiris, which was included in the circle of the gods of Upper Egypt. Osiris, however, had other ideas, and being an incarnation of Adelamai, the 11th initiate spoken of in the Book of Truth, was fully awake to the shortening of the holy fathers of Ammon. His was one great objection to the cult of Ammon was the inclusion of the animal and reptile gods, which were nothing more than the inventions of Satanaku, which had come down from the first emigrants who set out from Atlantis and settled in Nubia. For my children, the vile images of these gods had vastly pleased the mentality of Satanaku, and they were a good parallel to the terrible malcreations which he had produced in the evil days of Sargon. The royal priest, however, was given charge of the sacred ark of the priest of Ammon, in which were kept the various magical books and mysteries practiced by them. Osiris thought and pondered within himself, and seeing how evil the priesthood of Ammon had become, he decided upon the bold plan of visiting some of the oppressed tribes who inhabited the eastern part of the Nile Delta, for the sole purpose of persuading the king Amenhotep III to cease driving them like slaves, their chief work being to quarry stone from the temples of Ammon and his consort Mut. He obtained the king's permission to set out upon his journey, and after many months' tour of the province of the Delta, he returned and made his report to the king, not, however, without making out his own plan of action. Amenhotep, as he had foreseen, was soon overruled by the priests of Ammon, and yielded to their arguments with much pressure from the holy fathers. One day my children were Osiris and several of his initiate friends missing from the great temple of Ammon, and with them had also gone the sacred ark of Ammon, together with the magical books and the staff, which were supposed to shoot forth green leaves each year, to show that Ammon was pleased with the king and with the people. In truth, what happened was that if the priests required Ammon to show pleasure, they produced a budding staff, and if not, then the barren staff was exhibited in the temple. And as the ark was sacred and never opened except by the high priest of Ammon, who was at that time Men-ta-Amen, the trick was produced with the utmost ease. There was, however, my children, one exception of this. Osiris, feeling the urge of the cosmic force within himself, cried unto me, and he spake in this manner: O thou Osiris, thou who hast triumphed over the tomb, and who dost reign eternal in the kingdom of light with Ra the sun god, hear my supplication. If it be that I am thy chosen one to save those of the people who will hear, grant that the staff in the ark of Ammon may at thy command shoot forth green leaves. If thou wilt grant me this one manifestation of thy great power, then will I make thy name to sound throughout the length and breadth of the earth, and which this, thy land of Egypt, is thy heart. Having spoken thus unto me, my children, I called unto my beloved father Ta-el-Duad, and he answered me, saying, that I should let the staff bud in answer to the prayers of Osiris. When on the morrow he opened the ark with his followers, they saw the staff budding, and knew that the prayer of their leader had been answered. Then did they straightforward forsake the priesthood of Ammon, and went and dwelt in Syria, for the parents of one of their number. Then did Osiris raise up a temple to me, Osiris, and did seek to revive the ancient mysteries which I had shown unto him in his dreams. And he did choose as his high priest one of his followers, who was a brother of the circle of me, Osiris, in the temple of Ammon at Thebes. And his name was Osirian, which literally means Osiris guiding. So, my children, time passed on till one day I, together with my twin and spouse, eternal Isis, appeared unto Osiris in a dream, and bade him proceed unto Egypt and assume the leadership of the people east of the Delta, who were a certain portion of the descendants of the Adamic population, which had settled there in the days that came after the flood of Atlantis. This particular sect had always kept themselves apart, and had not intermarried with the dark-skinned men of Satnaku and the children of Yahweh. So my children, having assumed command over these tribes, Osiris proceeded unto Amhotep III, asking him to allow the people to migrate into the land of Syria, whither they wished to proceed, so that they might escape the harsh treatment of their Egyptian masters. The king at first readily consented, but when the high priest of Ammon heard the news, he threatened Amhotep with the wrath of Ammon and all the gods of Thebes. And I would tell you, my children, that this high priest, who was called Menta-Ammon, was a further incarnation of Ithboloth, the Atlantean usurper, who was still playing the part of Satnaku, who had ever been his way. However, the king was overruled by the threats of Ammon, and finally refused to open the frontiers for the purposed exodus of the Delta tribes. Thus was it, my children, that Osiris and his followers departed to the Delta province, and proceeded to organize the tribes so that they could fight their way into Syria. At length, my children, the tribes under the command of Osiris were ready to rise against the king of Egypt, and at a given time they prepared to march out of the Delta province and proceed into Syria. When the holy fathers of Ammon heard of these happenings, they went to the king and persuaded him to send a force against the immigrants. Then did Amhotep III call upon him his eldest son, Thutmose, who was captain of the royal bodyguard, and commanded him to proceed to the province of the Delta with an army, and so stop the exodus of the Delta tribes. By the time that the king's forces caught up with the migrating tribes, they had almost reached what is now known unto you, my children, as the Sinai Peninsula. What happened here I shall outline briefly for you. Osiris had organized the tribes after his manner. The Ark of Ammon, in charge of Osirian, proceeded to lead the tribes, and behind it came all the elders and chief priests of the temple, which was at that time only a portable building. Next came the women and children and all the civil population, and bringing up the rear came the men of war who guarded the exodus of the people. The frontier guards, having heard what was taking place, had either shut themselves up in their strongholds or joined with the migrating tribes. Then was it, my children, that a terrible storm, in the midst of which the heaviest fighting took place, broke over the whole province of the Delta. The Egyptians were very persistent and followed close upon the heels of those retiring tribes, till at length the marshlands of that time existing around the Sinai Peninsula were reached. The tribesmen, under the command of Osiris, retreated behind these marshlands, drawing the Egyptians after them. When at length both armies were between the peninsula and the marshes, the forces of Osiris turned and offered fight to the Egyptians, who were so completely taken by surprise that they fled in panic, many of them being submerged in the marshes in their hasty flight. And among those who perished in this manner was the king's eldest son and heir, Thutmose. Thus, my children, you will see how the tribes referred to in the Bible as the children of Israel crossed over into the desert of Sinai on their way into Palestine. The prophet referred to in the Old Testament as Moses was none other than the son of the king's sister, and I have referred to him in those my Chronicles of Osiris. He was, as I have told you, my children, an incarnation of Adolamayu, and the 11th master initiate mentioned in the Book of Truth. You will also perceive that the exodus referred to in the Bible took place during the latter part of the reign of Amhotep III, and not in the reign of Meren-Ptah, as is constantly stated by your mortal historians. Had this not been so, the young prince, who, as I have already told you, was undergoing initiation into the mysteries of Ra-Atanu at Heliopolis, would not have ascended the throne of his father, but his elder brother Thutmose would have been the successor. Had there been no battle in the marshlands west of the Sinai Peninsula, Thutmose would not have perished, but would have ascended the throne of his father. Having made these things clear unto you, my children, I shall proceed to the center of Heliopolis. The time had arrived when Amenhotep III was becoming feeble in health and being urged by the queen, Thyto, the mother of his younger son, Amhotep. He sent unto Heliopolis and commanded that the young prince should be made co-regent with him. Young Amenhotep's age was now close upon 15 years, and the queen, together with the rest of the followers of Ra-Atanu, thought it wise to secure the succession before the death of her husband, Amhotep III. The old monarch had become more and more dominated by the priesthood of Heliopolis after the death of his eldest son Thutmosis, chiefly because he blamed the priesthood of Ammon for the expedition which had caused his son's death. However, my children, from the time onward, the power of Ammon waned, and the son of Atanu rose in the heavens. It soon became generally accepted that young Amhotep would be able to keep the throne, especially as his mother Thyto was popular amongst the people, and the priesthood of Ammon could not count upon enough support to foster revolution. Under the monarchs of the 18th dynasty, Egypt had become the greatest nation of the then civilized world, and the people thought that in spite of his monotheistic views, young Amenhotep would still hold fast to the material traditions of the empire. After the passing of Amenhotep III, the young king ruled the land in conjunction with his mother Thyto. He spurned the princesses of the royal house and refused to enter into an alliance with any one of them. Thus came the first spark of hope to the holy fathers of Amun-Ra. The people became uneasy because the young king refused to marry, and therefore, as they said, could have no heir. Also, much to the annoyance of the royal court, his attentions were paid to his chief singer, who had become a devout follower of Atanu. The sound of music and things spiritual filled the king with rapture, and it soon became clear to all that he would in all probability try to make her queen, and pass over the princesses of the royal house, who had never withdrawn their allegiance from Ammon. As time progressed, the people became disaffected. The Syrian Empire was breaking, and the kingdoms were falling one by one to the sword of Osiris and his tribesmen. I would here tell you, my children, that Osiris had halted in the desert of Sinai, and had remained there till the death of Amhotep III. And it was not until he heard the internal strife which was gripping Egypt that he determined upon the bold plan of conquering Palestine and driving out the Egyptian garrisons, for he knew that the Syrian kings would join him, if it was to rid the land of the hated Egyptians. Amhotep IV's final insult to the priestly circle of Ammon was the order sent forth commanding the obliteration of the name of Ammon from the temples, together with that of his wife Mut. Then did the king change his name to that of Ka-an-Atan, which means the spirit of Atan. The capital was removed from Thebes, and magnificent new capital built at El-Amarna, and the whole court of Atan removed thither, as did also Queen Thyto. The prosperity of Thebes waned, and the priests of Ammon were in a sad state of penury. Kan-na-Atan, decisively called Akhenaten by the priest of Ammon, for the real translation is one who strives to reach the sun, maintained one shrine to Atan at Thebes, and this shrine was built almost entirely underground, and was walled in all around. None were allowed near, and my children, its secrets were never known after his death. It was entered by a series of secret doors moved by levers, and it was to this place that its followers conveyed his dead body, so that it could escape desecration at the hands of the priest of Ammon. Soon shall these subterranean chambers be again uncovered, and it will be seemingly by accident that one of the secret levers will be moved. The body of Khanatan will be found 2 chambers down in a room which appears round, which is in reality octagonal. This chamber is inscribed with prayers and songs to Aten-Ra, the one god of light and life. The body lies in an alabaster and gold sarcophagus, and near it will be found the ossified remains of a young woman. These, my children, are the remains of the chief singer, Harish, who, having borne the king a son, who afterwards ruled the double empire of Tutankhamun, threw herself into the Nile waters, thinking to find rest with Ra-Adanu, where she intended to await the coming of her lover, Khanatan. And here, my children, I would tell you that even as Khanatan was an incarnation of El-Erosufu, so was Harish an incarnation of his twin affinity, El-Erosufu'a. And they are given in the Book of Truth as the 12th male-female masters of the divine dynasty. Having made these things clear unto you, I would tell you a little concerning the marriage of Khanatan. After the court of Atan had settled in El-Amaran, the empire was becoming exceedingly unsettled. Revolts were breaking out amongst the Syrian garrisons, and the priesthood of Ammon were fostering internal strife against the king. At length it became necessary that something should be done to quiet the people, and at least take their attention in another direction, and for this purpose the priest of Heliopolis visited Khanatan. The old master, Onferu, himself came to the king, telling him it was necessary for him to take a wife, so that the clamoring of the people should be in part satisfied and diverted for the time being. Khanatan reluctantly took the advice given to him by his one-time master teacher, Onferu, and I would here tell you, my children, that the incarnate name of Onferu was Men-Atan, and at the request of the king he came to officiate in the great temple of the son of El-Amarna. On advice of the high priest, Khanatan sought alliance with a foreign princess who was of Asiatic birth. Her name was queen-wife, being Nefer-Atan. The affections of the monarch were never given to her, and much to the disgust of the people, no son was born to the king, but only daughters. At this point I would take you back to Harish, the chief singer of Khanatan and also his love. As I've already told you, a son was born to her secretly, and his name was called Tut-Ankh-Atan, which means the double of Atan. This son, my children, was housed secretly with his mother at Heliopolis, and it was intended that upon the death of his father Khanatan he should ascend the throne of Egypt, and so carry on the religion of Atan, which doubtless would have come to pass had not the holy fathers of Ammon at Thebes gained news of his intended heir. They resolved upon a plan to kidnap the young boy and bring him up into the temple of Ammon, so that they could produce him as a successor to Khanatan at a future date, not as one to foster the religion of Atan, but one to champion that of Ammon. This plan was successful in part, but only part only, for upon the death of Khanatan, his younger brother Semen-Ka-Re seized the throne and ruled for a few years at El-Amarna, and at the same time the priest of Ammon proclaimed the young boy pharaoh at Thebes, under the name of Tut-Ankh-Amen, which means the double of Ammon. Alas, how low stooped the beautiful Nefertiti! The priest of Ammon offered rich gifts, and she accepted. The little son of Harish was stolen by wiles from the priest fathers of Heliopolis. The name of Atan could no longer depend upon its nearest of kin. No wonder was it that Akhenaten, philosopher, poet, and priest as he was, became sick at heart and languished in spirit. Even the beautiful palaces ceased to bring joy to his crushed spirit. The Gorgon of Ammon again raised its evil head at Thebes, and its witchcrafts were subscribed to by the beautiful one Nefertiti. She practiced the black secrets of the evil genie, and sought company with soothsayers and all those who had devils for company. The fair city of Atan, through which ran the river Nile like a silver thread, became a city of desolation. The courtiers of the king quarreled and cast envious eyes at the throne of Pharaoh. Only one was there among the avaricious crowd of courtiers who was faithful unto the words of the king, even he, the faithful son. Semen-Ka-Ra. Came the day when Akhenaten, sick at heart and alien in body, was stricken with the disease of the lungs, and after a brief struggle to remain on earth, parted from the body. The faithful Semen-Ka-Ra fought nobly against the overwhelming odds which confronted him, but alas, all was in vain. The sorcerers of Thebes, spurred on by that evil one who had once lived a royal queen in Atan, raised up the little son of Harish, and set him up to destroy the life's work of his father. Alas, the heavens closed, and the rays of Atan lost their strength. Ammon prevailed, and the light of Atan was hidden from the temple. So ended the sad struggle between king and priesthood, the one standing for honesty and love, and the other for extortion and lies. The veil fell, and all was lost. Behold, it rises again that those sad days may be reconstructed. They, the figures in that ancient tragedy, have incarnate again, and must work out their karmic debts afresh. The circumstances are familiar to thee, twain, El Erosufu, El Erosufua. Therefore I say unto thee, go forward, and knowing the past, strive to bring the future to a successful conclusion. Be not headstrong, but work slowly and surely, that each foundation stone laid may remain steadfast, even unto the day of revelation, which is now close at hand. My children, the empire became sadly disrupted, and the Syrian possession, as well as the Asiatic empire, seceded from Egypt and proclaimed their independence. Harish, the mother of Tutankhamun, when she heard of the kidnapping of her son, became so grief-stricken that she flung herself in the waters of the Nile, just outside Heliopolis, and her body was afterwards found by the priest of Atnu, washed up on the banks of the river. When Khanatan heard the sad news, he hardly ever smiled again, but devoted himself even more closely to the temple of Aton. The body of Harish was taken at his command to the shrine of Thebes, and it remains there to this day, my children, and will be discovered when the secrets of that temple tomb are revealed. The body was not embalmed, partly because the embalmers were from amongst the priesthood of Ammon, and partly because Khanatan was now in the position of not knowing whom he could trust. In any event, the body, when found by the priest of Heliopolis, was so acted upon by the waters of the Nile that embalming would have been almost impossible. One important thing I would bring to your notice, my children, and it is this. Khanatan was, as I have told you, an incarnation of El Erosufu, and is mentioned in the Book of Truth as the 12th master initiate of the divine dynasty. He was one of the 24 initiates of the sacred heights of Atlantis, who had volunteered to take on the mortal body of Shem, that they might help the Yahavic men of Earth to learn the true way of the cosmos. The incarnation as Khanatan was disastrous in many respects. The material side of life was forgotten. The religious ideas were forced upon the people to a fanatical degree. The empire was allowed to break up while the king, in the eyes of the people, carried on the religion of Atanu or Atan, amongst a select few to whom he gave all and everything. He made no effort to show the remainder of the population the true light of Atan. Those who did not fall in with his ideas were simply forced into subjection. He was to the priest of Ammon and the general populace a tyrannical criminal who was amusing himself with the new religion, casting favors lavishly on those who embraced it with him. On the other hand, my children, had Khanatan maintained the material traditions of his ancestors, he would have been able to go much further and would have had the support of his people, in which case the opposing priesthood of Ammon would have been powerless and would have had to bow his head to popular opinion. His conduct toward his twin affinity, El Erosufua, who was incarnate as Harish, was also misguided. For my children, had he set himself to please the people, he would have been able in time to have made her the royal queen-wife, instead of having to carry on a secret liaison with her. In this event, the succession would have been secured. His son, Tutankhamun, would have become his successor and would have been brought up in the religion of Atan, extending the work commenced by his father. As things happened, the birth had to be kept secret, but it at length leaked out, with the result that the young son of Harish was kidnapped by the priest of Ammon and brought up as a devotee of that god at Thebes. However, the cosmos sees the intention rather than the deed. Overzealousness had made Khatan fanatical, and instead of approaching the problem with sane deliberation, he chose the course of unconditionally forcing upon the people his monotheistic views.